All right, let's just jump right in. Think about it. We talk to strangers all the time, right? Job interviews, first dates, even something as simple as a traffic stop. And in those moments, we kind of feel like we've got a pretty good handle on who we're dealing with. But what if we're not just a little bit off? What if we're completely, catastrophically wrong? That's the huge idea Malcolm Gladwell tackles in his book, Talking to Strangers. He basically argues that our go-to strategies for understanding people we don't know are, well, deeply flawed. Just take a look at this quote. It's from the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain back in 1938. He had just flown to Germany, sat down face to face with Adolf Hitler, looked him right in the eye, and sized him up. And he walked away from that meeting feeling totally confident, believing he'd gotten through to him. And wow, was he wrong. Dead wrong. Less than a year later, Hitler invades Poland. And just like that, the world is plunged into the most destructive war in human history. I mean, when you talk about the stakes of misreading a stranger, it just doesn't get any higher than that, does it? So, that brings us to the big question we're tackling here. Why are we so bad at this? And this isn't just about simple slip-ups. We're talking about world leaders, seasoned judges, elite intelligence officers, people who are supposed to be experts, getting it completely backward. So what are we all missing? Gladwell really frames this whole problem around two big, puzzling failures. The first one is all about deception, our total inability to spot a liar. And the second is about misinterpretation, how meeting someone in person can actually make us worse at figuring them out. So here they are, our two big puzzles. On one side, you've got the story of a guy named Florentino Aspilega. In 1987, he walks into a U.S. embassy and reveals that the CIA's entire spy network in Cuba, every single one of them, were actually double agents working for Fidel Castro. I mean, the world's top intelligence agency got played, big time, for years. And on the other side, you've got the Hitler paradox. The people who actually met him in person, like Chamberlain, were completely fooled. But the people who only knew him from a distance, like Winston Churchill, they saw him for exactly who he was. So how in the world does getting more up-close personal information make you less accurate? Okay, so let's start unpacking this. Our first major clue is something called default to truth. And believe it or not, it's a fundamental part of how our brains are wired. This is the truth default theory, and it comes from a psychologist named Tim Levine. And what it says is that our factory setting isn't skepticism, it's belief. We don't act like careful scientists gathering evidence before we make up our minds. Nope. We start out just assuming people are being honest, and we stick with that belief until the doubts just become too massive to ignore. And this pretty much tells the whole story. Our average accuracy rate for spotting a liar is just 54%. Think about that. That is barely better than just flipping a coin. And here's the kicker. It's not because we're bad guessers. It's because we're not even trying to guess. We're just assuming everyone's telling the truth. So sure, we get the honest people right, but the liars, they slip right past us. If you want a perfect, almost chilling example of this in the real world, we need to talk about Ana Montes. She was a top analyst at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and they called her the Queen of Cuba. For 16 years, Ana Montes was one of the most damaging spies in American history. She handed over countless secrets to Havana, and the whole time, nobody around her had a clue. Not her colleagues, who gave her glowing performance reviews, not her bosses, who gave her awards, not even her own brother and sister, who were both FBI agents. They all defaulted to truth. They just saw a brilliant, dedicated, hardworking colleague, not a traitor hiding in plain sight. Okay, so if default to truth is all about the words people say, our second big clue is about the faces we see and the way people act. Gladwell calls this the myth of transparency. This is that core belief we all have, that what you see is what you get, that someone's facial expressions, their body language, their whole demeanor, that all of it is a clear, reliable window into their soul. We think we can read people like an open book. But as it turns out, that's just a myth. Okay, check this out. This study is just mind-blowing. Researchers took bail decisions made by actual human judges and put them up against an AI. Now, the judges got to meet the defendants, look them in the eye. The AI, it only got the cold, hard data, age, criminal records, stuff like that. And the result? The group of people the AI said were safe to release was a full 25% less likely to commit another crime. Get this, meeting the person face-to-face actually made the judges worse at their jobs because they were totally misled by the myth of transparency.
So that brings us to the final piece of this puzzle. It's the idea that behavior is often tied to very, very specific circumstances. It's not just about who a person is, it's about where they are.
Look at this incredible story from the UK. After World War I, homes used this super toxic gas called town gas for their stoves. And tragically, it also turned out to be a very common and accessible method for suicide. Then, in the 1960s, the whole country switched over to non-toxic natural gas. And what happened? The suicide rate plummeted. The behavior was coupled to the context. Change the context, and you change the behavior. It's something we miss all the time because we're so focused on the person right in front of us and not the world they're living in. So, where does all this leave us? What's the big takeaway? The lesson from these three ideas isn't that we need to get better at judging strangers. It's that we need to finally admit just how bad we are at it. So really, it all boils down to these three big mistakes. We get strangers wrong because 1, our brains are hardwired to believe people. 2, we fall for this myth that we can read someone's true feelings just by looking at them. And 3, we totally forget to consider how much a person's surroundings and circumstances are driving their actions. And this is so crucial. The goal isn't to turn yourself into some kind of perfect human lie detector. It's to accept that the tools we're using are flawed. We need to swap our certainty for a little bit of caution. We need to trade our overconfidence for a healthy dose of humility. We just have to recognize our own limits when we talk to strangers. And that really leads us to the final critical question we have to ask ourselves. We spend our lives operating under this dangerous assumption that we can easily see into the hearts of others. So what happens? What changes in our world, in our relationships, in our justice system when we finally truly accept that we can't?